Jerome Anderson. I work with Koetter Fire. I'm a senior account manager at Koetter Fire. How many of you are veteran floor wardens?
Or we'll fire, we call them fire wardens.
Well, and I call them floor wardens because we're gonna talk about many different emergency situations today, because that are not related strictly to fire, so I refer to them as floor wardens. So I see 2 veterans. Are there any others? Get in the class. Anybody else? Well, I'll be relying on the veterans to answer some of the basic questions today. I'm assuming some of you were probably voluntold to show up today. I want y'all to take your job seriously, that you basically been put in charge during these emergency situations that we're going to discuss today, and that's what you need to do. You need to take charge. You need to remain calm. You'll see a common theme in all the slides that we go through today about remaining calm. If you have kids, you understand how important that is. Jennifer falls down and scrapes up her knee or her elbow. She looks right at you, right? If you start freaking out, oh my goodness, are you okay? Versus, you're okay, you're okay. It's funny how there's a crying situation or not. So I like to call y'all the moms and the dads. You are in charge of your troops, and some of these things are very important. Some of the decisions you guys make could mean the difference between somebody living and dying. And, or you could just be somebody's guardian angel that day. We've got a couple of videos to start off with right off the bat, and we're going to go through the slides, and then we'll have a video towards the end. But if at any point in time, especially veterans can certainly ask questions at any point in time as well, if there's something that's unclear to you at any point in time, please feel free to stop me and ask me. Get some clarification. We want to make sure that you're informed. The more informed and educated you are in these different types of situations, the more likely we are to have a successful outcome. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes, sir. We got one more coming in just in time. It's Pam. Come on in.
That's okay.
plan. These plans usually include evacuation or relocation procedures, recommended escape routes, and procedures for reporting fires and other emergencies. Some may contain detailed floor plans and the names of evacuation coordinators in each work area. The plan should also address the special needs of employees with disabilities. Remember, while it's the responsibility of building management to provide an emergency evacuation plan, it's your responsibility to understand it. And if you really want to get serious, take a few minutes during your lunch break to walk through the building and identify escape routes. The more you know about your building, the better prepared you'll be. You should also be able to recognize the sound of your building's evacuation alarm, so you can react quickly when you hear it. Even if you think there's no real cause for concern, don't ignore the alarm. Never assume it's a false alarm or a test. Always assume it's the real thing. Come on, let's go. Then follow your evacuation plan. Another important way to get prepared for an emergency is to participate in evacuation drills. Treat these drills seriously. Take the time to learn about your building's fire safety features, such as the way the PA system is used to coordinate the evacuation. Familiarize yourself with all of the escape routes available to you from your work area, and plan where you will go if your primary evacuation plan must change. The more familiar you become with your emergency evacuation plan, the faster you'll react and make informed decisions, like closing your office door or shutting down equipment that could make a fire worse. Remember, the objective of the drill is an orderly evacuation, not just a speedy one. It's about learning to prepare for the unexpected and knowing your egress routes. An egress system is a series of protected paths that help employees reach a safe location, either inside the building or out. These paths are usually corridors or aisles that lead to an exit, which is usually an enclosed, well-lit, uncluttered stairwell. The stairwells lead evacuees to what's known technically as an exit discharge. This is the area between the exit and a public way, like a street or a parking lot. If you do encounter smoke, get down. Crawl on your hands and knees. Keep your head 1 to 2 feet above the floor. That's where the air is cleaner and easier to breathe. Now, about using an elevator during an emergency evacuation, there's some important things you need to know. In many buildings, the elevator goes to the ground floor when smoke is detected either in the elevator lobby or in the elevator machine room. It will stay there until trained fire or rescue personnel take control of it using a special key. They might use the elevator to rescue occupants or begin firefighting operations on the upper floors. Even if the elevator is there waiting, don't use it. That's where it begins, with the understanding that an individual is accountable for his or her safety. Then it's up to you to take the time to be fully prepared. Take the time to learn what every employee should know about emergency evacuation. It's an effort worth making. It could save your life.
Answering honestly and not giving me the politically correct answer, what is typically our first thought when the alarms are going off in the building?
Fire drill.
Fire drill, is it real, is it a false alarm? We actually don't like to use the term false alarm in our industry, we call it a nuisance alarm. So whenever the strobes and the horns are going off, we want you to get up and get going. What we don't want you to do is we don't want you to call engineering or security or building management and ask, hey, is this real? Because in many cases, unless it's a designated fire drill, which they don't typically tell you about, they're actually typically trying to find out what's going on as well. And if they're having to field calls from all the tenants, that's only slowing the process for them. So again, strobes are going off, the horns are sounding, get your people up and going. Veterans, what are we typically gonna do the minute that they go off? What is your approach?
Start gathering up employees and get them out.
One of the things I like to talk to you about, and that's exactly right, is making sure that you have adequate help. COVID has kind of changed the landscape in the buildings, as far as how many people are in the buildings. There's no code, there's no law or any kind of regulation that says you have to have X number of floor wardens. But as a rule of thumb, we typically recommend that you have a floor warden and a backup floor warden for every 15 to 20 people in your space. Because Murphy's Law says if you've got just a floor warden, the day something happens is the day that floor warden's on vacation. That's also another thing. We want you guys to disseminate some of the information that you're getting from the class to your coworkers. That's why it's also important to make sure you have the requisite amount of help as far as backups and floor wardens, backup floor wardens and floor wardens, as well as what we call sweepers. The more people who understand the process, the more likely we are to have successful outcomes. We want to be pulling in the same direction. So depending on how many people are in your space, you may need to go back to your boss and say, I need some additional help here. I can't be responsible for 40 people. I'm gonna need another floor warden and I'm gonna need 2 backups for my position. It's gonna be a lot easier for you to try to corral them, because let's say for example, both floor wardens are out when that occurs. You at least still have 2 backups to try to control 40 people. So again, it's just gonna make the process easier. I mentioned sweepers earlier. These are the folks that you would help have assigned, have them go from office to office, make sure no one's being left behind, checking break rooms, restrooms, copy rooms. Now, we have the devices in all these spaces, right? And they're really loud, they're going off, they're designed to drive you out of the building, but sometimes people don't want to go. I heard you talking about it earlier. A lot of times it's actually the boss. Some people just will not get up and go. So you guys have been charged with the safety of your coworkers, and that includes your boss, of course. But if somebody does not want to get up and go, it is not your responsibility to sit there and try and convince them to get up and go. I also heard you mentioning about the fine. Fire department, great guys. They love to rescue people. What they don't like to do is come back into a building that's on fire to rescue someone that was perfectly capable of leaving. And they will write a ticket to the individual. It's not to the company, it's to that individual who refused to get up and go. It can be as much as $2,000. So it's something that it's important for everybody to get up and go. It's important for you to understand who those difficult people are, whether it's a boss who you think, no, I've got a conference call in a minute and this is really important. You have to understand who you're dealing with. We also have what we call difficult coworkers. These folks typically, they like to be in charge all the time, right? And so when they're having to take your directives, now they're going to be a little bit more difficult. It's important to get those people actually involved in the process as well. You could actually assign them to go stand in the elevator lobby to make sure that no one attempts to get onto the elevator, right? Because you're not supposed to be taking the elevators. Or involve them as a sweeper. Get them involved somehow and use them as an ally as opposed to having to work against them. Again, the more people pulling in the same direction, the better for us, right? So we get our people up and going, what do we do then?
Get them downstairs.
That's right, we head to the stairwell. We know we can't take the elevators. The elevators are tied into the fire alarm system. Unless the fire has been detected or been triggered by one of the alarms on the first floor, the elevators are automatically going to be recalled to the first floor. That's for the fire department to use if they choose to do so. Now, if, for example, a smoke detector on the first floor has actually triggered the alarm, that's what we call a secondary recall. It means the elevators will be recalled to the second floor. You don't want the elevators opening up on a floor, especially if somebody was on the elevator at the moment, being recalled to where the fire is at. Does that make sense to everybody? So we get our people up and going. What do we do then? This is going to be a part, the veterans can always answer this. This is part of what's important for those who are not veteran floor wardens. What do we do after we get our people heading down the stairs?
You get them out the door.
I'm sorry?
You get them out the door.
Well, but once we get into the stairwell, where are we going?
Down.
Oh,
Down where?
to the muster station, to the designated area.
Evacuation point.
So, all these answers are right. So, this building is considered floor above, floor below. There's 2 designations for buildings, and especially if it's a taller building. Smaller, low-rise buildings, not so much. They're typically what's called general alarm. So, the alarm goes off, everybody in the building evacuates, right? Not so much here. And it is going to depend on what floor you're on. So, for example, when I say floor above, floor below, if the alarm goes off and is triggered on the 7th floor, It's gonna go off on 8, 7, and 6. Those floors are supposed to drop down 3 floors and enter out into the hallway on that 3rd floor down. If the alarm is going off on that floor, it very well could be, then you need to, guess what? Drop down 3 more floors. Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I got a follow-up to his question.
Okay, well, it hadn't been addressed, but I'm just kind of curious. The situation that happened, in the World Trade Center,
Huh?
you had people who were wheelchair bound,
Yes, sir.
and some of these people were on the 50, 60, 70 floor. Obviously, we don't have that situation here, but if we had people who were wheelchair bound, how would we?
That's a great question. I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. Did you wanna follow up on something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so if you, let's say here, you have 8-6 or 8-7-6 going on, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're on 7, so you're gonna go down 3 floors, but you just open the door to see if it's still going off on 4?
Yes, you'll go into the hallway, and we ask that you do so quietly, right? Because if the alarms aren't going off on that floor, there's people still working on that floor, we ask that you do so quietly. Sometimes there's a little confusion because you might still be able to hear the alarm in the stairwell, but it's very clear when the alarm is going off. You don't have to guess, is it going off on this floor? It's going to be loud, and that's for a reason.
Okay.
That's a very good question. So where that might be,
Release.
Okay. I was asking if all the doors release,
And
because
that-
they're all
another great question.
access card.
Another great question, and that's why they're tied into the fire alarm system. They are supposed to release upon alarm. That's something that during the annual inspection, these things are checked to make sure that they are releasing on alarm. So there are situations where you might want to, or where you need to, for example, let's say you work on 4, 3, 2, or 1. If you're on 4 and you drop down 3 floors, you're gonna be on the 1st floor. We don't want you waiting in the building. You need to then follow, you have an emergency procedure manual. If you don't have an emergency procedure manual, Veronica will be happy to provide you guys with one. It's for the building, it's building specific. Tells you exactly where there's a north and a south stairwell. Now, we are creatures of least resistance, right? So when we exit our space, we're gonna typically go to the nearest stairwell. So whether it's the north or the south, it's gonna lead you down to the 1st floor, then you're gonna head towards the parking garage. That's where your gather or muster point's going to be. And you need to make sure the people in your space know where your gather or muster point is, because if, for example, they're not in your space when the alarm is activated, they're gonna need to know where to meet up with you because they're not actually evacuating with you. So it's important that they know where that's at. Does that make sense to everybody?
Are there specific instances, sorry, are there specific, so a fire starting at 8, okay, if you're up there starting fire. To me, that should trigger the whole building. If there's flames, everybody's floor should be going off, am I wrong? Because you're on
Well,
fire.
I understand your thought process. So this is a sprinkler building,
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
So what you don't want to have happen, there's a reason why there's 4 above, 4 below versus June.
Okay.
Because let's say, for example, this was a 40-story building. If you've got 40 stories of folks spilling out into the stairwells, it becomes extremely congested and people can't move. Besides, if there are flames and smoke, not smoke, but flames, it's going to trigger the sprinkler system. The sprinkler system isn't necessarily designed to put out the fire, it's designed to slow the spread of the fire until the fire department can get there and put it out. If you're uncomfortable being in a building where there's fire, whether you've had a loved one who's been in a fire, or you unfortunately were maybe in one yourself, or somebody with 9/11 just has a fear of it, it's okay if you want to exit the building. You absolutely can exit the building. That's when I would go back to the emergency procedure manual and make sure that you know where you're going and let somebody know, because if your group isn't going to exit the building, just let them know. Say, look, I'm not comfortable staying in the building. I want to go wait out in the parking garage until the all clear is given. And that's what will happen. The all clear will be given by Veronica and her team to let you know it's safe to return to the building. Now, my good friend there with security brought up a really good question about handicapped or mobility impaired people. Handicapped is a very static situation, right? If you're handicapped, you're typically handicapped. Mobility impaired, that can be more fluid. So we could be talking about a weekend warrior who's blown out his Achilles tendon, or somebody tore up a knee during a ski trip, late-term pregnancy, somebody that's much, much older. A situation where if they were to enter into the stairwell and slow other people down from being able to exit or go down to 3 floors, We don't wanna cause that type of a situation. So what do we do with those folks? Veterans?
We should have somebody assigned for those types of folks, older folks, people that, need help. And then you wait and go afterwards and go down as fast as you possibly can with them. Or if they can't get down, you go to the best place you can and hurry.
You're pretty close and you're hitting on a lot of
Oh,
stuff.
I'm right, I like that.
But you know.
Where we wanna be at and where we want these folks to be left, especially handicapped folks. Now, if it's somebody who's older, it's a stairwell landing on your floor. And one of the things that we ask that you do, if you have somebody who's handicapped, again, that's static or mobility impaired, it's your responsibility, and I believe that there's a checklist or a sheet in the emergency procedure manual. It's your responsibility to provide a list of the people in your space that fit those descriptions to building management. Because again, firefighters are great guys and they love to rescue people. And they're gonna be doing several things when they pull up to the building. They're gonna be, one, trying to determine, is there actually a fire in this building? Two, where's the fire at? And three, who do we need to rescue? Well, Veronica and her team, if they have a list of these folks who are handicapped or mobility impaired, they can already let them know. I've got 2 people up on the 7th floor stairwell landing that are waiting for you to come up and rescue them. So the reason, does anybody know the reason why we utilize the stairwells at all? To keep those people in there.
That's gonna be the safest place, based on the build or material used to.
You're right on. They're fire rated for 90 minutes. So it's 2 feet thick concrete. It's a very safe place to be inside the building. If you've ever been involved with the fire alarm going off, the police department or the fire department's typically here within 3 to 5 minutes. They get here very quickly. And again, one of the key things they want to know, who do we need to rescue? They're great guys. So they're going to be safe. But touching on that, if, for example, in the first video, which is funny, if you're up on 7 and you see smoke and fire, it's kind of a serious situation, right? It's a little bit, it's gonna cause some anxiety. It's very difficult to tell someone, Margaret, you're handicapped, you're gonna have to wait behind while everybody else does their thing. So what we would encourage you to do, you can't assign anyone to be Margaret's buddy that waits with her, but if Margaret has a good coworker that they're really good friends with, you can ask, would you mind waiting with Margaret in the stairwell landing? You're not required to, but it would probably help her to feel a little bit better. Here's why we're utilizing the stairwell landing. You guys have that information now as to why it's a safe place to be. But you can't really assign or force anybody to do that. But even though I know what I know about these types of things, if I was being left behind in a building that I saw that there was smoke or fire, I would be a little bit uneasy with everybody else going and me being left by myself. So sometimes just having another person there to help be a reassuring and calming factor is a big influence. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, the mobility impaired will change, and you'll take it, you'll add on to the list, and you'll remove from the list as needed. If someone recovers from that Achilles injury or their knee injury, you can have them removed from the list, but it's important we keep that up to date, because Veronica and her team will provide that to the fire department. It's important that y'all, again, go through the emergency procedure manual. You want to try to disseminate that to your other folks, again, making sure that everyone knows where they are going in the event that you're going to go outside the building. Again, even though you're up on the upper floors, it is possible that the alarm could be going each time you drop down and you ultimately have to go out. So you need to know ultimately, if we have to go all the way out, where's our gather and muster area? One of the things I recommend to you guys doing is you need to have your emergency vest, a brightly colored fashion forward vest, nearby, and if the alarm goes off. I also recommend, especially if you have a lot of people in your space. Now, if you work with 4 other people, you really don't need a list of your coworkers. It's easy to remember your coworkers and whether or not they're with you and whether or not they're there that day. If you have 40, 50, 60 people in your space, that's a lot more difficult. I would recommend you have an alphabetical list of your coworkers right there as well. You take that with you when you get to your gather and muster point. You can start doing a roll call. Who is here? Somebody might fall in the stairwell and injure themselves, unbeknownst to you. They might have been one of the last ones in the stairwell. They might have fallen and hurt themselves. Or, I don't see John. John's not here. No, John's on vacation this week, right? Somebody else can kind of help with that. But we want to make sure that the fire department is aware of anybody and everybody that they may need to rescue when they come into the building. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions on fire alarm? How many of you have discharged an extinguisher before? Wow, that is a bunch. What was the purpose?
Well, they do have,
Today's your day.
camping, that's right.
Camping?
Yeah.
Who else has discharged an extinguisher before? What was the purpose?
Kitchen fire.
Kitchen fire, well, great, it's great that you had one. Who else?
Well, I mean, there are different fire extinguishers for different things.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I've done the kitchen and I've also, done, office building.
Okay,
Yeah.
who else?
Be just for practice.
Practice?
Yeah.
Now, when you say practice, it wasn't a training class, you just had one, you're like, I wanna see how this thing actually operates?
Both.
Okay, okay. You can see the acronym for utilizing the extinguisher is PASS. So this pin that keeps me from being able to squeeze this handle is being held in by this little piece of plastic right here. This thing, you do not have to be a He-Man, you just twist it and it'll break right off. That will allow you to pull the pin, you'd aim, you'd squeeze, and you would sweep. You want to sweep at the base of the fire. We don't want you to become junior firefighters, right? We don't want you to put yourself in harm's way. The first video, the funny one, a trash can fire is a perfect example of where you may feel comfortable trying to utilize an extinguisher. It's important that you know where the extinguishers are in your space, because a lot of times we're walking around in our space, we're just so used to the space, you don't even really see the fire extinguishers, even though they're right there. So it's important for you to know where that's at in the event that something like that did occur. And again, only if you feel comfortable doing so. We do not want you to put yourself in harm's way trying to fight a fire. If you look over and flames are shooting up out of a cubicle a few spaces over, probably not a good idea to go looking for the nearest extinguisher. You want to get your people up and going, especially if the alarm hasn't been triggered at that point. Get them up and going, get them out of the space. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions on extinguishers? When it comes to medical emergencies, you know, most common things we see, heart attacks, seizures, strokes, things of these nature. How many of you have ever seen somebody having a seizure? It's jarring. It's really jarring. So again, this is why it's important, especially if you occupy an entire floor, you have a large space, why having a backup floor warden and other floor wardens to help you. Because if you're way down on this end and something happens down here and there's no, these are the important aspects of remaining calm. And we want you to be very specific. John falls over, starts having a seizure. Be very specific. Don't just holler out, call 911. Mary, please call 911. Joseph, call down to building management, let them know what's going on. Why do we need to let building management know what's going on if we've already called 911?
Because when they arrive, they'll need to know why and what floor.
Genius. I love it. Love it. Perfect answer. We can also utilize that difficult person who likes to give out orders in this type of an instance. We can have them go wait in our elevator lobby on our floor, right? And Marco and his team will actually have an elevator recalled down to the first floor. Security will be prepared to meet the emergency responders to get them into the building as quickly as possible. Your coworker who's difficult can get them right to your space, so when they come out onto that floor, they're not guessing which direction to go. This could save 2 or 3 minutes. And so if it was you upstairs having a seizure or a heart attack, you would certainly want those extra 2 or 3 minutes. So again, just take charge, but remain calm at all times. These things are really important. Anybody have any questions about medical emergencies? Y'all are gonna do well on the popular list. How many of you have been trapped in an elevator before? How long?
40 minutes.
40 minutes?
Not here though,
It was 11 minutes, but it felt like it was longer than that.
Yes?
Like 30 minutes.
So the longest I've ever heard in doing all these classes I've been doing over the years is 4 hours. That is an extremely long time. The average time is about 15 to 20 minutes. So we're going to give you a little bit of insight. And this is, again, not necessarily something where you're going to, quote unquote, save someone's life, but you might be their guardian angel in this situation. How many of you are claustrophobic? And so Murphy's Law says if you're claustrophobic, you're probably going to get stuck on an elevator with 10 other people, right? So there's no real fear of the elevator dropping. You know, we see a lot of things with movies where, oh, it's gonna plummet to the basement. No, these elevators are being supported by 5 or 6 really thick steel cables. They're not gonna fall. It's just like any other type of device that's electric, has electronics. It's going to malfunction from time to time. There's a call button inside the elevator. What it does is it calls a monitoring station. The monitoring station is gonna ask you some general questions. What building are you at? They're gonna ask for the building name, the address. There's a cab number inside the individual elevator that you're in. You give them the cab number, they're gonna ask, is everyone okay? You can say yes or no. And you can say, they might even ask, do you know what floor you're on? I have no idea. I got on up 1, I was going up to 7. It stopped somewhere in between, no problem. So you'll notice if somebody's claustrophobic, it'll take about 2 seconds before you start seeing or hearing elevated breathing. And this is where you can kind of be the guardian angel. Calm them down, reassure them, ask them to sit down. Say, this is fine. Explain the situation. Your knowledge that you get from the class today is going to help reassure people, right? We're totally safe. I'm gonna call, because what the monitoring station does after getting all this information, the first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna dispatch an elevator technician to the property. They're then gonna call building management as well. So Marco and his team will, in the meantime, while they're waiting on the elevator technician, who will typically show up very quickly, they're also gonna be trying to determine exactly where are they at between floors 1 and 7. Where do they stop exactly? We would encourage you guys, and it's usually us men who do it. We have to be the he-man and the heroes. If someone starts trying to pry the doors open to get out, try to dissuade them from doing so. It's a terrible idea, right? Because in many cases, you open the doors, oh, it's just right there, I can climb out. Until they get halfway out and the elevator starts to move again. Now, half of them is on the floor and half of them is in the elevator. It's just a terrible idea. So try to strongly dissuade anyone from doing that. We also ask that you don't call 911 in that type of situation. Utilize the call button. 911 is going to dispatch the fire department. Like I say, those guys love to rescue people. The building would really appreciate it if they actually had an elevator technician come out here and save you, probably in less time than having the fire department come out here with their axes and chop through that steel door. So just follow the procedures. Again, let people know what you're doing, how the process works. You will be somebody's guardian angel that day. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions on elevator entrapments? What are we talking about when it comes to severe weather here in Texas? Tornadoes primarily, right? So if we hear a report on our phone or something that there's a tornado that's been spotted in Plano near the Dallas-Fort Tollway, what's our first reaction?
Drive towards it right
Go
away.
to the window.
Go to the window.
Check it out. What does the wall look like? Wall clouds, are they green? Where's the hook?
That's exactly right. How many of you remember the tornado that hit downtown Fort Worth 20 years ago? Yeah, and so a ton of superficial damage was done to that building. Glass was blown out. It had a ton of, there was no structural damage done to that building whatsoever. These buildings are actually very safe in tornadoes, right? And as we were talking about earlier, very safe space in the building during a tornado is actually the stairwell landings. It's a very safe place to be. You will have people in your space who are deathly afraid of tornadoes, and they might try to leave the building. Much like you can't get the boss to get up and get out, you can't stop someone from leaving, but you can try to strongly dissuade them from doing so because it's the worst idea possible. They don't need to leave. This is where, again, your knowledge. Margaret, I know that you're really upset and scared. The stairwell landing, did you realize the walls inside the stairwells is 2 feet thick and it's made of concrete? I would be willing to go and wait with you inside the stairwell landing if that makes you feel better, but we really shouldn't go outside. It's extremely dangerous. That might be enough to actually dissuade Margaret from wanting to leave the building. But at the end of the day, if she's intent on it, there's not much that you can do. So if it comes upon us quickly, right, and you are in an exterior office space or cubicle area and it's on the building right away, you need to try to, the real danger is from flying glass. You need to get behind your desk. If you have time and there's been a tornado reported, you want to move into interior office spaces, or break rooms, or copy rooms, or even restrooms. Even the stairwell. The stairwell's totally fine to be in the stairwell. We just wanna move away from the real danger in that situation, which is flying glass. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Office creepers. Typically talking about two different types of folks in this situation. People who are in the building to solicit, which trust me, Veronica has not allowed anyone to come into the building to solicit you guys for anything, so they're not welcome. Or folks who are in here looking to steal stuff. What's one of the easiest things for us to steal a value nowadays?
Phones.
Phones.
Cell phones.
This phone. So for example, let's say you don't have controlled access into your space and you don't have a receptionist, which is fairly common. I could be walking around in your space dressed just like this, right? And I'm approaching your cube, you come out of your cube. Now we almost, as I can see, everyone's phone is with them, but when you copy something, when you make copies of it, you're not carrying your phone to the copy room, right? You're gonna leave it out on your desk. I see you walk out, I look inside, there's your phone, I take it, I can slip it right into my pocket, and I can walk right out. It's so simple to do. You ladies are actually really good about protecting your purses and your valuables. You typically put them in the desk drawer or a filing cabinet drawer. We're gonna ask that you try to be super careful with everything that you do, right? So sometimes, and I don't want you to assume that it's always men, right? Or that they're dressed a certain way. Again, you can be dressed very professionally. It's very easy for women to actually get into a space and grab another woman's purse. Same type of situation. You come out of the cubicle ahead of her because you have visitors in your space all the time, right? You don't necessarily know everyone who's in your space. She could come right in behind you, grab your purse, and walk out. She's not going to attract any attention by carrying a purse. So it's very, very easy. We don't want you to confront anyone that comes into your space, whether it's somebody soliciting or potentially to steal something. You ladies have great intuition, right? So we want you to utilize that. It is okay to approach somebody, even though I say don't confront them. Hi, I'm Jerome. You look like you're lost. Can I help you find something? Right? It's very simple to do. A lot of times that might be enough to kind of scare them off, but it has also given you an idea based upon how tall they were to you when you call down security. I've got a guy up here in a blue and white shirt with blue slacks. He's about 6 feet tall. I don't think he belongs up here. I asked him and he left. Now my security friends are not gonna come upstairs and tackle the first guy that meets that description. But what they will do is they will come up and investigate, right? So they want to make sure. It's very possible that somebody has gotten off on the wrong floor and gotten into the wrong space, and that you're walking around and there's like, no, this is definitely not the right space. So it's very possible, but that's part of what he does, right? So we want to report it to the proper folks. And even with the solicitation, if they come into your space asking or hawking something, no thank you, you're not supposed to be in here. Be sure and call down to security and let them know we've got somebody, because if you don't, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go to the next suite over and they're gonna do the same thing. And like I say, Veronica is not inviting people into the building to solicit the tenants. So just call, give a description, try to see which direction they go once they leave your space, but don't put yourself in danger by confronting anyone. If you're uncomfortable as a female by doing that, if you have a he-man in your space, John, I'm getting a weird feeling about this guy over here. Would you mind running over and seeing what he's doing in our space? Just utilize what you have at your hand, okay? Any questions on office creepers? Bomb threats are probably the least thing that we're gonna deal with. We did have some issues about 3 or 4 years ago down in Austin. They were getting bomb threats and some situations were going on. In your emergency procedure manual, you have what's called a bomb threat checklist. It's important that I would encourage you, clearly it states in your emergency procedure manual that the receptionist needs to make sure that she has a copy of that bomb threat checklist, because what you wanna do is you wanna keep somebody on the phone and talking for as long as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's only going to go to the receptionist. If you have an individual line at your desk that someone could actually call, or if it has to be routed through the receptionist, then the receptionist is the main person. But it is possible that you might need that checklist as well, because we want you to keep them on the phone. We want you to ask them what appear to be the most ridiculous questions, right? Well, where's the bomb at? Who's the bomb intended for? These types of things, right? When's it supposed to go off? these sound like ridiculous questions, but are you really dealing with somebody with a full deck of cards if they're actually calling in bomb threats? They might actually answer some of these questions, and if they do, you want to make sure you're taking notes. The minute you realize that you've received a bomb threat, immediately start emailing the coworker. Please call 911, I've got a bomb threat on the line. Then reach out to building management and let them know as well, right? So we want to keep them on the line. Some of the questions, again, there's some checklists on there as far as, was the person agitated or were they strangely calm? Did they speak with an accent? An accent doesn't necessarily mean Middle Eastern. Somebody from Minnesota or North Dakota or even Boston, I'm a native Texan. No offense to anybody that might be from any of those places, but to me they have strange accents. Just, you would know whether any of these types of things, background noises, any of these things, because it's important for you guys to understand if there is a bomb threat in the building, Veronica and her team are not going to evacuate the building just because a bomb threat's been called in. So what has to happen is the police are gonna show up and they're gonna question you. They're gonna look at your notes, go over your notes with you, and they have to establish two things. Is this a real threat, and do we have a safe and secure scene in which to evacuate? Why is that important? And who else could actually be outside as well? Let's say it's not even really a real bomb threat. Let's say they have really nefarious thought process in mind, because if everybody knew, well, I just called in a bomb threat and the building's gonna evacuate, that's where active shooters could actually come into play. I'm just gonna sit outside and wait for everybody to start pouring out. So the police have two jobs to do. Is this an actual bomb threat? And do we have a safe and secure scene in which to evacuate? If those two criteria are met, we're gonna let Veronica and her team know we need to evacuate the building. It's only at that point will that occur. So it doesn't automatically happen, because in many cases these bomb threats are fake bomb threats. It could be a former boyfriend or husband who's upset about something, who's calling in something. We have seen that women have called in bomb threats too, but I would say probably by and large it's mostly men. But it's craziness, but you have to take everything seriously. Anybody have any questions on bomb threats? And since we were talking about active shooter, this is going to be our last video of the day, and this will be the last portion of the class. We'll show the video and then we'll talk about a few things. This part is the only part of the presentation where you guys are not responsible for the safety of your coworkers. This is where you guys have to kind of develop a plan of action for yourself. I'm going to encourage you to make sure that your coworkers also watch this video. It's called Run, Hide, Fight. I know some of you have already seen it. For those of you who haven't, you can sort of do a Google a search on YouTube for Run, Hide, Fight. This video will pull up. I encourage you to get all of your coworkers to watch this video because again, it's not a deal that you're going to be sharing any of this type of information with them. You're not going to be corralling the team to let's go do this. It's basically every man for himself if someone comes into your space and starts shooting. Does that make sense? So let's watch this and then we'll come back and we'll go over a few other things.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with the decision. Remember what's important. You, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you're out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooting. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
How many of you have controlled access into your space? That can limit,
Yeah.
it can limit the ability for someone to get into your space. It doesn't completely prevent it. If it's glass doors, for example, they can shoot through the glass doors. But again, active shooters typically want to take path of least resistance. They want to do as much damage as possible. So locked doors typically are very good at dissuading it. How many of you have inside your space, like a supply closet or even offices that have handles on the doors that lock? That's also very beneficial because in some that you don't have controlled access or locks inside your space, doors that have locks on them inside the space, you may want to talk to your boss about that being something that y'all consider adding as an added measure of protection. One of the things I challenge you guys to do is when you go back to your space and you sit down at your desk, ask yourself, if if someone were to come in the front door right now and start shooting, what would I do? Where would I go? Because if you wait until that moment the shooting starts, it's typically not gonna turn out too well. You need to have a plan of action before then. It doesn't have to be that difficult. If you think you're going back out the front door the same way that you came in, it's probably not gonna be good, because that's normally the way that he's coming in. Not always, but normally that is the case. So it depends on how your suite is set up. That might be the only way out. There might be a back door. Again, how would you get there? How would you do that? And again, these are all questions that all of your coworkers should be asking themselves prior to, okay? I'd like to talk to you guys on a couple little things on a personal level, like the extinguishers, for example. Most of us have smoke detectors in our homes, right? And we feel comfortable that they work, and we test them, and we change the batteries, and we do all this stuff. And they've probably been triggered by cooking in the kitchen at some point in time, right? Oh, I feel safe with that. Well, but what if something were to happen? Let's say you have children or grandchildren, and the smoke detector wakes you up at 2:30 in the morning. It's going off. You open your bedroom door. Yes, there's smoke everywhere. And there's actually fire in the hallway between me and my children or my grandchildren. Your smoke detector is not going to help you then. Having an extinguisher or a couple of extinguishers in your home is a really good idea. You can buy them at Home Depot or Lowe's. They're like $40 or $50. You would be kicking yourself if something happened to your children or your grandchildren because you didn't take the time to invest in a couple of simple extinguishers. I have them in my house. They're in the garage. One's in the garage right off the kitchen. I have another one upstairs in the master bedroom. So if I need to grab it, I can get to it rather easily. It's like having a gun. Better to have it not need it than need it not have it. When it comes to the active shooter on a personal level, you know, you take out the two most common areas where we have active shooters, work and school, and look at all the places where we've had active shooters in the last 7 or 8 years. Movie theaters, concerts, nightclubs, shopping centers, restaurants. Heaven forbid, we've even had it in church. Everywhere that we go to either relax or spend time with loved ones or to have a good time, you're susceptible now. We saw it in Allen recently. We know it can happen anywhere. Matter of fact, when you see on the news someone that's survived an active shooting, oh, I never thought it could happen here. No, it happens everywhere. There's crazy people everywhere that want to hurt people. So I'm going to encourage you guys to be on your toes when you're out and about with your loved ones. Just do the simple thing. Look for the exit signs. When you walk into a place you're unfamiliar with, where are the exit signs in here? Don't assume it's the front door. Where is the other exit for in here? A lot of my friends who are in law enforcement, they will not go to a restaurant or someplace and sit with their back to the front door. It's just not a good thing to do. Now, it depends on how it's set up, but you do. It's crazy that we have to think this way. But again, if you want to have a successful outcome in a type of situation like this, it's how we have to think. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on the active shooter stuff? And please encourage your coworkers to watch that run, hide, and fight. It's very important because you're not going to be there to save them. Okay? Recapping. Make sure you have enough help as far as your floor wardens, your backup floor wardens, your sweepers. Again, more people pulling in the same direction, we're going to have successful outcomes. You need to make sure that you have that list of handicapped or mobility impaired folks supplied to Veronica and her team. It's important. You might not have anybody on the list, and that's fine. Just even let her know, shoot her an email. We don't have any handicapped or mobility impaired people in our space at this time. Just so she knows, right? That's important. The brightly colored safety vest and emergency procedure manuals. If you don't have them or if you need more, let her know. She can get those too, okay? And last but not least, make sure your coworkers watch that Run, Hide, and Fight video. Because it truly is. It's every man for himself when that happens. It's kind of like the first video, Michael Scott. It's funny. The trash, everyone for himself. That's what it's like with an active shooter. So make sure that they can make an informed decision for themselves in that situation. Anybody have any questions on anything that we've talked about today? I appreciate y'all's time. We went a little bit over, but we waited to get everybody in. I appreciate y'all attending.